You don't belong here, boy. This podium has hosted presidents, not the children of janitors. What would you do if someone crushed your dreams just because of who your father was? In the hallowed halls of Harvard University, where brilliant minds are supposed to flourish, 13-year-old Marcus Thompson was about to face the most humiliating moment of his life. The dean of debate had caught him at the podium, practicing in secret, and her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. But sometimes, the most powerful voices come from the most unexpected places. What happened next in that debate hall would leave everyone speechless, including the professor who thought she knew everything. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The Grand Debate Hall of Harvard University stood empty at 11:47 p.m., its mahogany panels gleaming under the soft emergency lighting. Marcus Thompson pushed the cleaning cart behind his father, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. At 13, he'd memorized every echo in this room, every shadow cast by the portraits of distinguished alumni watching from the walls. "Start with the windows, Marcus," James Thompson said softly, his voice carrying the weariness of a 12-hour shift. "I'll handle the floors." But Marcus's eyes were drawn, as always, to the podium. It stood like a beacon at the front of the hall, commanding attention even in the darkness. How many brilliant minds had stood there? How many world-changing arguments had been born on that very spot? 5 minutes, Dad?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. James looked at his son, then at the door. "Make it quick. And keep your voice down." Marcus approached the podium with reverence, running his fingers along its smooth edges. He'd read every book about public speaking in Harvard's library, watched every recorded debate from the past decade. While other kids played video games, Marcus played with words, crafting arguments in his mind. He adjusted the microphone, even though it was turned off, and began. "Ladies and gentlemen, the question before us today isn't whether education is a right or a privilege. The question is, who decides who deserves to be heard?" His voice, clear and confident, filled the empty hall. He'd practiced this speech 100 times in his bedroom mirror, but here, in this sacred space, the words took on new power. Marcus closed his eyes, imagining the seats filled with attentive faces, imagining his words matching. When we silence voices based on circumstance rather than substance, we don't just harm individuals, we impoverish our entire society. Every unheard voice is a solution lost, an innovation stillborn, a perspective that could have changed everything. He was so lost in the moment that he didn't hear the door open. Didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows until... "What do you think you're doing?" Marcus's eyes snapped open. Professor Victoria Whitmore stood in the aisle, her face twisted with indignation. Even at this hour, she was impeccably dressed, having stayed late for a faculty meeting. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes blazed with the kind of anger reserved for the gravest transgressions. I was just," Marcus stammered, stepping back from the podium. "You were trespassing," Professor Whitmore interrupted, striding forward. "This podium is for Harvard students and faculty only. Not for the children of maintenance staff who think they can play pretend." James rushed forward, mop still in hand. "Professor Whitmore, I apologize. He's just curious about..." "Curious?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is not a playground, Mr. Thompson. This hall has hosted presidents, Nobel laureates, Supreme Court justices. Not..." She looked at Marcus with undisguised disdain, "janitor's sons playing make-believe." Marcus felt his face burn. "I wasn't playing. I was practicing." Professor Whitmore's voice dripped with condescension. "Young man, do you have any idea what it takes to earn the right to stand at that podium? Years of education, refinement, breeding, things that can't be mopped up after hours." "Professor, please," James interjected, pulling Marcus back. "He meant no harm. He's a good kid, straight A's in school, what school would that be? Certainly not Phillips Exeter or Choate. She adjusted her glasses, examining Marcus like a specimen. You don't belong here, boy. Not at this podium, not in this hall. There are places for people like you, and this isn't one of them. The next afternoon, Harvard's debate hall buzzed with activity. The university's elite debate team had assembled for their crucial practice session before nationals. Professor Whitmore stood at the front, her presence commanding absolute attention from the 12 students seated in the front row, each one carefully selected from prominent families. Excellence, she began, her voice carrying the authority of 3 decades at Harvard, is not merely about what you say, but who you are when you say it. Gravitas cannot be taught, it must be inherited, cultivated, refined through generations. Bradley Worthington III, captain of the debate team, nodded enthusiastically. His grandfather's name adorned one of the buildings on campus. Beside him, Stephanie Chen Williams meticulously took notes on her leather-bound pad, her pearls catching the afternoon light. Some people, Professor Whitmore continued, her eyes scanning the room, believe that anyone can master the art of rhetoric. They think watching YouTube videos or reading library books can substitute for proper breeding and education. How quaint. A few students chuckled knowingly. They'd all heard about last night's incident, news traveled fast in their circle. The service door creaked open, and Marcus entered carrying a box of supplies, following his father. They were supposed to be invisible, restocking the supply closet while classes were in session. But Marcus couldn't help but slow his pace as Professor Whitmore demonstrated proper posture. The key to commanding respect, she said, is understanding that some voices carry natural authority while others, well, they're background noise at best. Bradley noticed Marcus lingering by the supply closet. Professor, I think we have an audience, he smirked, pointing. All heads turned. Marcus froze, the box heavy in his arms. Professor Whitmore's lips pursed. Ah yes, our aspiring orator from last night. She addressed the team, this is precisely what I mean. Some people don't understand boundaries, don't comprehend why certain spaces exist for certain people. Maybe he wants to join the team, Stephanie suggested with false sweetness. I'm sure he has fascinating perspectives on, what is it your father does again? Sanitation management. The laughter was sharp, cutting. Marcus's father touched his shoulder gently, urging him toward the closet, but Marcus stood firm. Actually, Bradley added, standing up, this could be educational. Hey kid, why don't you show us what you were practicing last night? Give us a good laugh before we get to serious work. That's enough, Bradley, Professor Whitmore said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely displeased. Though you raise an interesting point about natural versus acquired abilities. She walked closer to Marcus, her heels clicking ominously on the wooden floor. Tell me, young man, what makes you think you could ever compete with these students? Bradley's father argues cases before the Supreme Court. Stephanie's mother runs the largest media conglomerate in New England. What exactly is your pedigree? Marcus lifted his chin slightly. My mother taught me that words have power regardless of who speaks them. Your mother? Professor Whitmore's eyebrow arched. And where did she study? Yale. Princeton. She studied at, Marcus began, but his father squeezed his shoulder. We should go, James said quietly. Sorry for the interruption. As they moved toward the closet, Marcus heard Bradley stage whisper, maybe we should start a charity program. Debate for janitors. We could get tax breaks. The laughter followed them into the supply closet. In the darkness among the cleaning supplies, James set down his box and turned to his son. Marcus, you need to understand something, he said softly. These people, they'll never see you for who you really are. To them, we're just janitors, Marcus finished bitterly. No, James said firmly. We're people who know the value of honest work. But some folks need to put others down to feel tall. Don't let them make you small. Outside, They could hear Professor Whitmore resuming her lecture. Now, let's discuss the upcoming exhibition debate. We'll be hosting alumni and donors, showing them why Harvard produces the finest speakers in the nation. I want nothing but excellence. Marcus clenched his fists. They had no idea who he really was, what he could do. They saw a janitor's son and stopped looking. But maybe it was time to make them see. The following day, Marcus tried to stay invisible. He helped his father empty trash bins in the adjacent study rooms while the debate team practiced next door. Through the thin walls, he could hear them preparing for the exhibition, their voices confident, their arguments polished but predictable. The resolution, Bradley's voice carried clearly, is that American universities have become too inclusive, sacrificing excellence for diversity. I'll argue the affirmative. Marcus nearly dropped the trash bag he was holding. He'd researched this topic extensively, knowing it was a favorite of conservative donors. Bradley's arguments were straight from think tank talking points, lacking nuance or original thought. Statistics show that when admission standards are lowered to accommodate, Bradley continued, but his facts were wrong. Marcus knew the actual data by heart. Without thinking, Marcus found himself in the doorway. That's not accurate, he said, his voice cutting through Bradley's monologue. The room fell silent. 12 pairs of eyes turned to stare at him. Professor Whitmore, who had been nodding approvingly at Bradley's speech, slowly rose from her chair. I beg your pardon. Her voice was dangerously quiet. Marcus swallowed but stood his ground. The study he's citing was debunked 2 years ago. The sample size was too small, and they didn't control for socioeconomic. How dare you? Professor Whitmore's composure shattered. You have the audacity to interrupt my class. To correct my students. Bradley laughed dismissively. This is rich. The janitor's kid thinks he knows more than us. I've read every study on this topic, Marcus said quietly. The real data shows. Enough. Professor Whitmore marched toward him, her face flushed with rage. Your father's position here hangs by a thread. One word from me to the administration, and you'll both be escorted off this campus permanently. James appeared behind Marcus, having heard the commotion. Professor, please. He didn't mean any disrespect. Disrespect? She whirled on James. Your son has shown nothing but disrespect since I first caught him contaminating our podium with his presence. Perhaps it's time we reconsidered whether your services are still required. Wait, Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. You're threatening my father's job because I corrected a factual error? Stephanie giggled. Oh, this is perfect. He thinks he's defending academic integrity. Professor Whitmore's eyes narrowed as she studied Marcus. Then, a cruel smile played at her lips. You know what? You clearly think you belong on that stage. So let me make you a proposition. The room grew quiet, sensing something momentous. Our exhibition is this Friday. Alumni, donors, distinguished guests, everyone who matters will be there. If you truly believe you can match these students, then prove it. Take the stage. Show everyone your supposed brilliance. Professor, Bradley protested, you can't be serious. The exhibition is for the best and brightest. She didn't take her eyes off Marcus. Well, our young friend here seems to think he qualifies. What do you say, boy? Are you ready to show Harvard what a janitor's son can do? Marcus felt his father's hand on his shoulder, warning him. But he also felt something else, years of silence, of being invisible, of watching from the shadows while others claimed spaces they hadn't earned except through birthright. Yes, Marcus said firmly. I'll do it. The laughter was immediate and explosive. Bradley actually fell back in his chair. Stephanie wiped tears from her eyes. Even some of the quieter team members couldn't suppress their amusement. This is going to be legendary, Bradley gasped between laughs. The janitor's kid thinking he can debate at Harvard. Someone should film this. Professor Whitmore raised a hand for silence. Oh, I intend to make this very public. In fact, I'll announce it to all our guests, a special exhibition showing Harvard's inclusive spirit. You'll go last, after our real debaters have shown what excellence looks like. She leaned closer to Marcus, her voice dropping so only he and James could hear. And when you humiliate yourself, which you will, when you stammer and freeze in front of people who matter, maybe then you'll understand your place. And if you don't show up? If you realize your mistake and try to back out? Well, I think you know what happens to your father's employment. Marcus, no, James whispered urgently. But Marcus met Professor Whitmore's gaze steadily. What's the topic? Her smile was predatory. How appropriate, the role of privilege in American education. I'm sure you'll have some unique perspectives from your position at the bottom of the ladder. Friday. 7 p.m. Don't be late, she added, turning back to her students. Class, let this be a lesson. Some people need to learn their limitations the hard way. As Marcus and his father left, the laughter followed them down the hall. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He had 3 days to prepare for the most important speech of his life. 3 days to show them that brilliance wasn't inherited, it was earned. That night, in their small apartment in Roxbury, James watched his son pull book after book from hidden corners of his room. Debate theory, rhetoric, philosophy, texts that most college students would find challenging, all annotated in Marcus's careful handwriting. How long? James asked quietly, sitting on the edge of Marcus's bed. Marcus paused in his frantic preparation. How long what? How long have you been studying all this? Really studying it? Marcus sat back on his heels, surrounded by his secret library. Since Mom died. 3 years. James closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. Angela Thompson had been a force of nature, a civil rights lawyer who took on cases others wouldn't touch. She'd met James when he was wrongfully accused of theft at his previous job. She'd not only cleared his name but fallen in love with his quiet dignity. She used to say I had the gift, Marcus continued, his voice soft. Remember? She'd make me stand on that wooden box in the kitchen and defend my positions on everything. Why I deserved an extra cookie. Why bedtime should be later. She said I could move mountains with my words if I learned to use them right. I remember, James said thickly. She would have been so proud. Marcus pulled out a faded notebook, his mother's. She left me these. All her cases, her arguments, her techniques. I've memorized every page. And then, when we moved here after she died, when you got the job at Harvard, I started spending every free moment in their library. The librarians think I'm there doing homework, Marcus smiled sadly. They don't know I've read every significant debate text in their collection. Aristotle's Rhetoric, Cicero, Douglas versus Lincoln, the complete works of Barbara Jordan. James stared at his son in amazement. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were trying so hard to keep us safe, to keep us invisible. Marcus's voice cracked. You said that's how we survive, by not making waves. But Mom always said the opposite. She said silence in the face of injustice is complicity. That sounds like her, James laughed despite his tears. But Marcus, these people at Harvard, they're not interested in justice. They'll try to humiliate you. Let them try. Marcus pulled out another notebook, this one filled with statistics, studies, and carefully crafted arguments. I've been preparing for this my whole life without knowing it. Every night in that debate hall, I wasn't just practicing, I was studying them. I know how they think, how they argue. They rely on privilege, not preparation. James picked up one of the notebooks, flipping through pages of complex arguments. This is. Marcus, this is doctorate-level analysis. Mom used to say that being underestimated was a weapon if you knew how to use it. Marcus stood, energy crackling through him. They see a janitor's son. They don't see the hours I've spent in their own library. They don't know that I've watched every recorded Harvard debate from the last decade. They don't know that I've been accepted to 3 gifted programs but we couldn't afford them, so I taught myself instead. The Worthington boy, Bradley. His father might be a Supreme Court lawyer, but his son doesn't even check his sources. Stephanie Chin Williams. She's coasting on her mother's reputation, using the same arguments from prep school. They've never had to fight for their place, so they've never learned to fight well. James stood, placing his hands on his son's shoulders. You're really going to do this? Dad, they threatened your job. They laughed at us. But more than that, they represent everything Mom fought against. The idea that some voices matter more than others based on who your parents are, not what you have to say. She always said the law was about making sure everyone gets heard, James remembered. Rich or poor, powerful or powerless. And Friday night, they're going to hear me. Marcus turned back to his books. I need to prepare 6 possible argument paths. Professor Whitmore will try to sabotage me, maybe give me the hardest position or change the rules. I need to be ready for anything. James watched his son work for a moment, then quietly left the room. He returned with a garment bag. What's this? Marcus asked. Your mother's favorite suit jacket. The one she wore for her biggest cases. James unzipped it carefully. I've been saving it for when you were ready. I think she'd want you to wear it Friday. Marcus touched the fabric reverently. It was beautifully made, classic, the kind of quality that would stand beside any designer label in that hall. We'll have to take it in, James said, but I know how to sew. Your mother taught me, said everyone should know how to present themselves with dignity. Dad, Marcus's voice was thick with emotion, what if I fail? What if they're right, and I don't belong there? James pulled his son into a fierce hug. You belong anywhere your voice can make a difference. Your mother knew it. I know it. And Friday night, they're all going to know it too. Friday arrived with the weight of destiny. The debate hall filled with Harvard's most distinguished alumni and donors, men and women whose names graced buildings, whose donations shaped policy, whose children's admission letters were mere formalities. Professor Whitmore stood at the entrance, greeting guests with practiced charm. Judge Harrison, so wonderful you could make it. Mrs. Chin Williams, Stephanie is simply excelling. She wore her finest academic robes, the ones reserved for the most prestigious occasions. Tonight was more than an exhibition, it was a demonstration of why Harvard remained the pinnacle of American education. Victoria. Dean Morrison approached, champagne in hand. I heard you have something special planned tonight. Professor Whitmore's smile turned sharp. Oh yes. A little, object lesson in why we maintain certain standards. You'll find it most instructive. The hall filled quickly. Marcus stood outside with his father, both in their best clothes, James in his only suit, Marcus in his mother's tailored jacket. Through the windows, they could see the glittering crowd, hear the confident laughter. You don't have to do this, James said one last time. Yes, I do, Marcus replied, checking his note cards one final time. He'd prepared for every contingency, every possible variation of the topic. Mom wouldn't have backed down. Neither will I. Inside, Professor Whitmore took the podium. The room fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Harvard's annual debate exhibition. Tonight, you'll witness the culmination of our rigorous training, the fruits of combining natural talent with proper cultivation. Polite applause rippled through the audience. We have a special treat tonight, she continued, her tone shifting to something almost gleeful. In the spirit of, shall we say, democratic ideals, we're opening our stage to an unexpected participant. You see, we've been challenged by someone who believes that access to this podium should be based on merit alone, not breeding or background. Murmurs of interest buzzed through the crowd. The son of one of our maintenance staff, a 13-year-old boy who cleans these halls with his father, believes he can stand alongside our trained debaters. I thought it would be educational to allow this experiment. The murmurs turned to chuckles. Some alumni exchanged knowing looks. So tonight, after you've seen what real excellence looks like from our team, we'll conclude with young Marcus Thompson attempting to argue at the Harvard level. I trust you'll be patient with his efforts. She paused, savoring the moment. Our topic tonight is the role of privilege in American education. Our debaters will explore whether our traditional systems of excellence should be maintained or democratized. In the back, someone whispered, "This should be amusing." The exhibition began. Bradley took the stage first, arguing with practiced smoothness that educational excellence required certain backgrounds, certain breeding. The audience nodded along, these were their values being reinforced, their positions justified. Stephanie followed, equally polished, suggesting that while diversity had its place, standards shouldn't be lowered to accommodate it. More approving nods, more comfortable agreement. One by one, the debate team performed their carefully rehearsed pieces. They were good, smooth, confident, saying exactly what their audience expected to hear. Professor Whitmore beamed with pride after each performance. Finally, as the clock approached 9, she returned to the podium. And now, she announced, barely suppressing her anticipation, our special guest. I present Marcus Thompson, son of James Thompson from our maintenance department. Marcus believes he has something to contribute to our discussion on privilege and education. Let's see what that might be. The door opened. Marcus entered, his mother's jacket fitting perfectly, his head held high. The laughter started immediately, some open, some hidden behind hands. He looked so small walking toward that grand podium, so out of place among the portraits of distinguished alumni. Someone whispered loudly enough to Carrie, "Is this a joke?" Professor Whitmore's smile was triumphant. This was exactly what she'd planned, a reminder of why some people belonged and others didn't. Marcus reached the podium. He had to stand on his toes slightly to reach the microphone. More titters from the audience. He looked out at the sea of faces, skeptical, amused, already dismissing him. In the back, he saw his father standing by the door, proud and terrified in equal measure. Marcus took a breath, feeling his mother's presence in the jacket she'd worn to fight impossible battles. Then he began to speak. "You know what I find interesting?" Marcus's voice was quiet at first, but it carried. Every person who spoke tonight used the same word at least 5 times. Excellence. But not one of them defined it. The laughter died down slightly. His voice was steadier than they'd expected. Is excellence inherited? Is it something that passes through bloodlines like eye color or height? Or is excellence what happens when brilliance meets opportunity? Marcus gripped the podium edges, finding his rhythm. Tonight, I'd like to tell you about 2 boys. Professor Whitmore shifted in her seat. This wasn't the stammering performance she'd anticipated. The first boy was born in a mansion. From birth, he had tutors, private schools, test prep from age 5. His parents donated buildings, so his teachers knew his name before he walked through the door. When he struggled with math, a Princeton professor was hired to help. When he showed interest in debate, a former national champion became his personal coach. Some audience members glanced at their own children in the front row. The second boy was born in a 2-bedroom apartment. His single mother worked 3 jobs. He learned to read from library books because they couldn't afford to buy them. When he struggled with math, he watched Khan Academy videos on a borrowed laptop. When he showed interest in debate, he snuck into university halls at night to watch others practice. Marcus's voice grew stronger. Now here's my question: if both boys stand before you with identical arguments, identical passion, identical skill, which one do you call excellent? The one who climbed a mountain, or the one who was born at the summit? This is ridiculous, someone muttered, but others shushed them. Bradley Worthington spoke tonight about maintaining standards, Marcus continued, making eye contact with Bradley. He cited 3 studies. Shall I tell you why all 3 were flawed? The first, from the Heritage Foundation, used a sample size of only 200 students, all from private schools. You can't measure diversity's impact by studying homogeneity. Bradley's face flushed. He hadn't expected to be fact-checked. The second study he mentioned. It was funded by the same organization that profits from standardized test preparation. That's like asking a candy company to study whether sugar is healthy. The third? It was literally retracted by its authors last year for methodological errors. But I suppose when you're used to people accepting your words without question, you don't bother verifying your sources. How dare, Professor Whitmore started to stand, but Dean Morrison placed a hand on her arm, intrigued. Ms. Chin-Williams argued that lowering standards harms excellence. Marcus turned to address Stephanie directly. But she never asked, whose standards? Who decided that knowing which fork to use at dinner matters more than knowing how to stretch $1 to feed a family? Who determined that speaking with perfect grammar is more valuable than speaking truth in any dialect? The room had gone completely silent now. You see, that's the beautiful lie of meritocracy. Marcus's voice rang with conviction. Those who benefit from privilege create the very standards by which merit is measured. It's like a race where some people start at the finish line, then turn around and lecture others about proper running form. An elderly alumnus in the front row leaned forward, no longer smiling. Let me tell you what excellence really looks like, Marcus continued. Excellence is my father, who works 16-hour days to keep these halls clean so students can learn in dignity. He's never missed a day in 5 years. Excellence is the mother in Dorchester who teaches her children calculus even though she never finished high school herself, learning alongside them every night. Excellence is the scholarship student who works 40 hours a week while maintaining a 4.0, not the legacy admit who pays others to write their papers. Excellence isn't about where you started, it's about how far you've traveled. Professor Whitmore's face had gone pale. This wasn't going according to plan at all. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn book. This is interesting, The Future of Academic Excellence, by Professor Victoria Whitmore, published 15 years ago. Would you like to know what you wrote, Professor? Professor Whitmore's face went from pale to ashen. You wrote, and I quote, "True academic excellence cannot be gate-kept by circumstance of birth. The greatest minds often emerge from the most unlikely places, and our institutions must be vigilant against the complacency of inherited privilege." Gasps rippled through the audience. Several heads turned to look at Professor Whitmore. You wrote about growing up poor in rural Kentucky, Marcus continued, his voice gentle but relentless. How you were mocked for your accent at Yale. How professors assumed you didn't belong until you proved them wrong. You wrote about the janitor who encouraged you to keep going when you wanted to quit, Mr. Eugene Williams. You dedicated this book to him. Professor Whitmore's hands trembled as she gripped her chair. So what happened? Marcus asked, looking directly at her. When did you forget Mr. Williams? When did you become the very gatekeeper you once fought against? The silence in the room was deafening. Even the skeptics were leaning forward now. But I'm not here to attack anyone, Marcus's tone shifted. I'm here to talk about potential, wasted, dismissed, overlooked potential. Do you know how many Einsteins we've lost to poverty? How many Marie Curies never saw a laboratory because they were too busy cleaning them? He pulled out statistics, hard data memorized from hours of research. Harvard accepts 70% of its legacy applicants but only 5% of regular applicants. Princeton shows similar numbers. Yale, Stanford, all the same. We're not selecting for excellence, we're selecting for pedigree. Meanwhile, the boy from Compton with a genius for mathematics never makes it past community college because he can't afford SAT prep. The girl from rural Alabama who could revolutionize medicine never sees a research lab because her high school doesn't offer AP chemistry. An older woman in pearls was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. You want to talk about maintaining standards? Marcus's voice rose with passion. Let's talk about the real standard that matters, human potential. Every time we slam a door in someone's face because of their zip code, their parents' job, their accent, or their skin color, we don't just hurt them. We hurt ourselves. We rob our society of brilliance that could solve problems, create art, advance science, heal divisions. He paused, letting his words sink in. I stand here tonight not because I'm special, but because I'm lucky. Lucky that my mother taught me to fight with words before she died. Lucky that my father had a job that let me sneak into this library. Lucky that Professor Whitmore's challenge gave me this platform, even if she meant it as humiliation. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably. But how many aren't lucky? How many brilliant minds are mopping floors not because they lack ability, but because they lack access? How many voices are we not hearing because we've decided in advance they have nothing worth saying? Marcus looked out at the audience, lawyers, CEOs, power brokers, people who shaped the world. You have children, he said simply. Many of you have children sitting in this very room. And yes, you want the best for them. But ask yourself, do you want them to succeed because they're truly excellent, or because the competition was eliminated before the race began? Do you want them to win because they're the best, or because they were the only ones allowed to play? When your daughter becomes a doctor, do you want it to be because she was brilliant, or because the brilliant girl from Roxbury never got the chance to apply? When your son argues before the Supreme Court, do you want it to be because he was the finest legal mind of his generation, or because the finer minds were washing dishes to pay rent? The uncomfortable shifting increased. These were questions they'd never been forced to confront so directly. Marcus's voice filled the hall now, carrying the power of 3 years of preparation, of his mother's legacy, of every night spent watching from the shadows. I learned something interesting in your library, he said, a slight smile playing at his lips. Did you know that some of Harvard's most distinguished alumni were once considered unworthy? W.E.B. Du Bois faced professors who believed black minds were inferior. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was told women were too emotional for law. Barack Obama was told someone with his name would never be taken seriously. He gestured to the portraits lining the walls. Half the faces watching us tonight were once outsiders. But somewhere along the way, the outsiders who made it inside forgot to hold the door open. They pulled the ladder up behind them. That's not excellence, that's fear. Fear that if everyone gets a chance, your children might actually have to compete. Fear that in a fair race, privilege might not be enough. An elderly man in the front row, Judge Harrison, Marcus recognized from newspaper photos, was nodding slowly. But here's what I really want you to understand, Marcus's voice softened. I don't hate you. I don't hate Bradley or Stephanie or even Professor Whitmore. How can I hate people who are trapped by the very system that traps me? You're so busy protecting what you have that you've forgotten to question whether it's worth protecting. He pulled out one final card, his closing argument. My father cleans these halls every night. He empties your trash, mops your floors, makes your world function smoothly. You've walked past him 1,000 times without seeing him. But he sees everything. He sees the stressed students crying in empty classrooms. He sees the professors struggling with doubt. He sees the human beings behind the ivy-covered walls. James stood straighter at the back of the room, tears streaming down his face. He taught me something Professor Whitmore never could, that dignity isn't granted by degrees or pedigree. It's inherent in every person who works honestly, loves deeply, and refuses to let others define their worth. Marcus stepped back from the podium slightly, his final words ringing clear. So yes, I'm the janitor's son. My father cleans up after you. But tonight, I hope I've cleaned up something too, the comfortable lies you tell yourselves about merit and excellence. Because until we stop confusing privilege with potential, we'll keep losing the very minds that could save us all. The real question isn't whether I belong at this podium. The real question is, how many others like me never got the chance to stand here? How many voices have you silenced without even knowing they existed? And what world might we build if we finally learn to listen? Marcus stepped back from the podium. For a moment, the silence was absolute, hundreds of people frozen in their seats, processing what they'd just witnessed. Then, from the back of the room, a single person began to clap. James Thompson, tears streaming down his face, applauding his son. The sound broke the spell. Judge Harrison rose to his feet, his weathered hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. The elderly woman in pearls stood next, then another, then another. The standing ovation spread like wildfire through the hall. Even some of the debate team members found themselves on their feet, swept up in the moment. Bradley sat frozen, his worldview shattered. Stephanie stared at Marcus with something approaching awe. But Marcus's eyes were on Professor Whitmore. She remained seated, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, shock, anger, and something else, recognition. Of her younger self. Of the ideals she'd once held. As the applause thundered on, Marcus walked off the stage with quiet dignity, just as his mother had taught him. He'd said what needed saying. Now it was up to them to decide what to do with it. The reception afterward was chaos. Alumni and donors surrounded Marcus, business cards appearing from every direction. "Young man, have you considered Phillips Academy? I'm on the board. My foundation offers full scholarships for exceptional students." That was the most impressive argumentation I've seen in 40 years, Marcus politely deflected, overwhelmed. His father stood protectively nearby, equally stunned by the transformation. These same people who had walked past them invisibly for years now couldn't stop talking to them. "Excuse me." A firm voice cut through the crowd. Dean Morrison approached, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Thompson, both Thompsons, might I have a word in private?" They followed him to a small antechamber. Professor Whitmore was already there, sitting rigidly in a leather chair. She wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes. "Well," Dean Morrison began, settling behind a desk. "That was unprecedented. In 30 years at Harvard, I've never seen anything quite like it." "Dean Morrison," Professor Whitmore started, her voice strained, "I can explain." He held up a hand. "Victoria, we'll discuss your role in this later. Right now, I'm interested in young Mr. Thompson." He turned to Marcus. "Where exactly did you learn to argue like that?" "My mother was a civil rights lawyer," Marcus replied simply. "And I've spent 3 years in your library." 3 years? The dean's eyebrows rose. "You're 13. I started when I was 10. Every evening while Dad worked, I read. Everything I could find about rhetoric, logic, argumentation. I watched every recorded debate. I studied every winning argument." "Self-taught." The dean leaned back. "Remarkable. And your current educational situation?" "He's homeschooled," James interjected. "I couldn't afford, that is, the local schools weren't challenging enough for him." "I see." Dean Morrison steepled his fingers. "Mr. Thompson, what I witnessed tonight was doctoral-level argumentation. The way you deconstructed opposing viewpoints while building your own case, most of our law students couldn't manage it." Professor Whitmore shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Which brings me to you, Victoria." The dean's tone cooled. "I've received several disturbing reports about tonight. That you deliberately orchestrated this as a form of public humiliation. That you threatened Mr. Thompson's employment. Is this accurate?" Professor Whitmore's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. I thought." She stopped, started again. "He was trespassing. Using equipment without permission. I wanted to teach him about boundaries, about respect for what?" Marcus interrupted gently. "For the same barriers you once fought against." She finally looked at him, really looked at him. Not at the janitor's son, but at the brilliant young mind she tried to crush. "I read your other books too," Marcus continued. "The ones about imposter syndrome, about the masks we wear to fit in. You wrote about how you changed your accent, your clothes, your entire identity to be accepted here. How you promised yourself you'd never let others feel that same shame. Tears welled in Professor Whitmore's eyes. I became everything I hated. We all do sometimes, Marcus said softly. When we're scared of losing what we've gained. Professor Whitmore stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to them. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Mr. Williams, the janitor who encouraged me at Yale, he had a son. Brilliant boy. Could have been anything. She turned around, tears streaming down her face. But he never got the chance. No one saw past his father's occupation. I swore I'd never be like those professors who dismissed him. But somehow. She walked directly to Marcus. I owe you an apology. Not just for tonight, but for becoming the very gatekeeper I once fought against. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that excellence isn't about protecting privilege. It's about recognizing potential wherever it exists. Dean Morrison, she continued, turning to face him. I'll be submitting my resignation. No, Marcus interrupted. Everyone looked at him in surprise. That's not what I want. I don't want you to quit. I want you to remember. Remember why you started teaching. Remember Mr. Williams. Remember that kid from rural Kentucky who proved everyone wrong. What would you suggest? Dean Morrison asked, intrigued. Marcus thought for a moment. A new program. For students like me, brilliant but overlooked. Not charity, but opportunity. Let them audit classes, use the library, participate in debates. Judge them on merit, not money. Run by, the dean prompted. Professor Whitmore, Marcus said firmly. Because no one understands both sides better than someone who's lived them. 3 months later, the Harvard debate hall buzzed with nervous energy. But this time, the faces in the prep room were different, a mix of private school students and kids from Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. The new Harvard Youth Excellence Program had attracted brilliant minds from across the economic spectrum. Marcus stood before them, adjusting his team captain pin. At 13, he was the youngest captain in Harvard debate history, but no one questioned his position anymore. His team had already won 2 regional championships. Remember, he addressed his diverse team, we're not here to prove we belong. We're here because we belong. Devon, you're leading on historical analysis. Sarah, economic arguments. Bradley, yes, Bradley Worthington III was there too, having asked to join Marcus's team after weeks of soul-searching. The humbling experience had changed him. I've got the constitutional framework, Bradley finished. Checked all my sources twice. 3 times, Stephanie Chin Williams corrected, also part of the team. Marcus taught us, excellence means going beyond what's expected. Professor Whitmore entered, but her entire demeanor had transformed. Gone was the rigid superiority, replaced by the passionate educator she'd once been. Team meeting in 5, she announced. The Princeton prep squad just arrived, and they look confident. Let them, Marcus grinned. Confidence without preparation is just noise. As the team huddled together, James Thompson watched from the doorway, now wearing a supervisor's uniform. His promotion had come with the new program, recognizing that maintaining spaces of learning required its own form of excellence. Mr. Thompson, Dean Morrison appeared beside him. Proud of your son. Every day, James replied. But I'm proud of all these kids. They're proving what Marcus said that night, excellence isn't about where you start. It's about how far you're willing to go. In the main hall, the competition began. The topic, resolved, that American institutions should prioritize potential over pedigree. Marcus took the podium for his opening statement, his mother's jacket now tailored perfectly to his growing frame. He looked out at the audience, still prestigious, still powerful, but now mixed with faces from every neighborhood in Boston. 3 months ago, he began, I stood at this podium as an outsider. Today, I stand here as proof that when we open doors instead of guarding them, excellence multiplies. Today, I stand here not as the exception, but as the beginning of a new rule. He gestured to his diverse team. We are the children of janitors and CEOs, immigrants and Mayflower descendants, single mothers and Harvard legacies. We are what America looks like when it lives up to its promise. And we're here to show you that the future of excellence isn't about protecting the past, it's about unleashing the potential that's been here all along. The debate that followed was legendary. Marcus's team didn't just win, they redefined what winning looked like. They showed that bringing different perspectives didn't lower standards, it raised them. They proved that a team that included the janitor's son and the billionaire's daughter could create arguments neither could develop alone. When the results were announced, Harvard victorious, the celebration included everyone. No more invisible people in the halls of power. No more brilliant minds locked out by circumstance. Later that evening, as the hall emptied, Marcus found Professor Whitmore alone at the podium where it all began. "Thank you," she said simply. "For reminding me who I used to be. Who I want to be again." "We all need reminding sometimes," Marcus replied. "That's why we need each other." As they left the hall together, professor and student, former adversaries now allies, the portraits on the walls seemed to watch approvingly. The legacy of Harvard was changing, one voice at a time. And somewhere in the night, Angela Thompson's spirit smiled, knowing her son had done more than win a debate. He'd won the fight she'd started, the fight to make sure every voice could be heard, every potential realized, every dream given its chance to soar. The janitor's son had indeed silenced Harvard's debate hall. But more importantly, he'd opened it up to voices that had been waiting centuries to be heard. Dear friend, what defines your worth, the circumstances of your birth or the content of your character? Marcus Thompson's story reminds us that brilliance exists in every corner of our society, waiting for just one chance to shine. Every day, we walk past potential genius, in the person cleaning our offices, serving our food, or fixing our cars. We make assumptions based on job titles, zip codes, and last names, never realizing we might be dismissing the very minds that could change our world. This story isn't just about one exceptional boy who proved his worth. It's about the millions of voices we never hear because we've decided in advance they have nothing valuable to say. It's about the excellence we lose when we mistake privilege for merit, when we confuse opportunity with ability. Whether you're a professor or a janitor, a CEO or a student, you have the power to open doors instead of guarding them. You can choose to see potential where others see limitations. You can be the person who says yes when the world says you don't belong here. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about excellence and opportunity, please share it with others. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge assumptions and inspire change. Together, we can build a world where every voice matters, where every dream gets its chance, and where the content of our character truly defines our destiny. Remember, excellence isn't inherited, it's earned. And it exists everywhere, waiting to be recognized.